Hey everybody, welcome back to Backlog Banter. I'm your boy Abram, joined as usual by my from the depths, Zonai-infused, Sky Island dwelling, Ganon's minion, fucking sticking shit together co-host, defying the timeline, Mr. Tucker Hazel. He needs no introduction, but I gave him a big one
many.
Anyway.
You gave me too many. That's the opposite of none.
And we're here today to talk about The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom and our favorite person in the entire universe, Jeff Keighley.
Oh, sure.
Because we're here today to talk about the chances of The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. I might have said Breath of the Wild before. I meant Tears of the Kingdom.
Yeah, I think good.
This game's chances of winning Game of the Year this year at TGA's. And we'll also talk about its other awards nominations too, and the overarching sort of narrative around this game, and the ways it maybe has lost some ground to Baldur's Gate.
Yeah.
But before we chat about that, if you want to talk to us about Zelda or anything else at all, join our Discord, link as usual, top of the description, way down there. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, ring the bell, leave a comment.
Yeah.
Tell your mom you appreciate her.
Sure. Yeah, we like to do some family bonding, tangentially though. We like to recommend family bondings, though we don't do any of it ourselves, you know what I'm saying?
And if your mom has passed away, leave a copy of Tingle's Rosie Rupee Land at her tombstone.
Oh, sure.
Tucker, The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, I think it would be fair to say, in May, in June, in October, in what month comes after that? August.
July. No, there was another one.
July, August. Until the release of Baldur's Gate 3.
Sure.
Would have been safe to say that Tears of the Kingdom was the presumptive frontrunner for Game of the Year.
And we presumpted. I was listening to our Tears of the Kingdom video actually yesterday because I love BLB. I love watching BLB. I like making BLB, but most importantly, I like watching it. Where we said, we laughed when we talked about the idea that something else could win Game of the Year. And now that laughable point that we discussed back then is not so laughable now. And frankly, the conversation has shifted so greatly that a lot of the crux of this conversation here is going to be the ground it has lost. And is it possible for it to regain that? How does the votes break down in terms of its likelihood of winning? And of course, we'll also be breaking down its likelihood of winning in other categories as well. And also how this game sits as a giant chunk of what this year is for games. But it's going to be a very fascinating game to talk about.
It will be. And to be fair, we are going to keep the conversation largely about the categories and talking about the game through those lenses and its larger sort of narrative. We have done a lot of, especially on an hours level, a lot of discussion about this game, both the two of us and then also Bro and Brendan and everybody. So go check out the channel. There's plenty of deep mechanical narrative stuff about Tears of the Kingdom on the channel to go find. But that kind of nonsense, that kind of ballyhooing, we're here to ballyhoo in a different way.
Sure.
Because I too, for a long time, was like, Tears of the Kingdom has it zipped up. Nothing's going to beat it. But I have to say, from where I'm sitting now, I don't think Tears of the Kingdom has a particularly strong shot at Game of the Year anymore.
Sure.
I do feel like Baldur's Gate has it locked down, but even if Baldur's Gate was just poofed from existence, I don't know if Tears of the Kingdom has that definitive advantage.
Yeah, sure.
And I want to get into it. Now, obviously, I'm also, people who know me will know, and if you don't, go watch the videos, I am definitely colder on Tears of the Kingdom than most people are. I still think it's a phenomenal game. I still had a really good time with it. But I don't have much of a stake in this one winning. It's no Mario Wonder. But I think, and I'm curious how this strikes you, Tucker. I think that Tears of the Kingdom's chances of Game of the Year, of which it is up against...
Aha, there you go. I was wondering when you were going to do it.
Of which it is up against Alan Wake 2, Baldur's Gate 3, Spider-Man 2, Resident Evil 4, and Mario Wonder. I think its chances are significantly harmed by the fact that Breath of the Wild already won. What do you think about that?
I think that's true. I think that the interesting element of the history of the Game Awards and how this game, especially in comparison to Breath of the Wild, stands as one of the games of this year, is that the Game Awards haven't been around long enough for direct sequels to start winning, or for that to be a trend to where it is comfortable and usual that two games back-to-back from the same developer in the same series with the same art style and physics and all that kind of stuff are winning that award. And I think that across the board, people wouldn't say Tears of the Kingdom wouldn't be deserving of winning Game of the Year.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's still hotly in that conversation.
Yeah.
And I think through this conversation, I will probably be making the case that I still think it is at least second place, if not there being a solid chance for it to win. But I think that you're right. I think the fact that Breath of the Wild, in terms of what it did for reinventing Zelda and reinventing open world formula, it was much more a game of that year that acted as an inflection point. As a crux, it was dominating the conversation. And Tears of the Kingdom, well, I would contend, is a better game. And there certainly is the conversation of which one is better. And they're at least on equal levels of quality and different kinds of innovation. It does lose a little bit of its own mystique because we, as people very in tuned into the industry, remember how big Breath of the Wild was. And the way that its physics and open world are presented to you were revolutionary then and are inherently less revolutionary now, 6 years later. So I do think that, it being a direct sequel and building more strongly off of the bones. Oh, hey, I've got a friend here.
I got one in the back.
I did not expect a creature to jump on my lap halfway through that sentence. Building off of the groundwork of that game that came before more strongly than any previous Zelda game ever has, I think that, that definitely cools its chances of being seen as the defining game of this year, because it is built off of strongly off of the bones of another game that already was one of the definitive, if not the best game of all time.
Yeah, I think that The Last of Us is actually kind of an interesting series to draw into conversation here. In that, obviously, and I think we mentioned this in a previous video, but The Last of Us, original Last of Us, lost out on Game of the Year in 2013 to GTA 5.
Which is already maybe one of the most legendary two-game battles ever made.
and like, at a certain point, I mean, you could have released anything against GTA 5 and you're probably going to lose. Which is just to speak to the magnitude of that game. Of course, So, Last of Us Part 2 is, in my opinion, and yours too, one of the defining games of the entire medium. And by its own merit, absolutely deserving of the win. But I do think that it was probably helped by the fact that Last of Us 1 didn't win.
Oh, sure.
This is our chance.
The Game Awards as we know them didn't exist at that point. It was a Spike Game Awards where GTA 5 ended up winning.
That's fair.
It was the year later. So when I said sequels haven't won, that's still true because Last of Us didn't win. But even if it had, by technicality, of course, you can throw a few things at it. But I think that's definitely true. But I also think that the time gap between those two games and also the difference in the approach to playing through Last of Us and Last of Us 2, I think people recognize them as very different kinds of games. You're not reutilizing the same areas. You're not reutilizing the same graphics or engine or anything, completely from the ground up new game. But Tears of the Kingdom is one of those asset reusing sequels. And I think it's one of the smartest uses of an asset reusing sequel of all time. But we'll actually see quite often games like this, or now this year also Spider-Man 2, or last year God of War Ragnarok. These games are in the top few conversation, but I do think that with Game of the Year winners, there seems to be a trend more towards what was brand new that year. Whether or not it's a sequel completely reinventing and from the ground up building a game, I think does sort of give bonus points, and then by that same metric kind of detracts a little bit from certain games winning Game of the Year, regardless of their quality. I mean, I would say that that God of War Ragnarok, Spider-Man 2, and Tears of the Kingdom are all better games than their original ones, but they are inherently less revolutionary, and so you have to kind of build that balance in your mind when you're talking about Game of the Year.
Definitely, and I think also the point I was making, like most directly, is that in some ways, and this happens a lot in film, which has a much longer awards history to draw, comparisons and trends out of, but there's a lot of career awards. A lot of actors and actresses win career awards, right?
Doesn't seem to happen for games.
It doesn't really, but I do think that a game like Last of Us 2 is helped by the fact that, yes, now we can recognize what Naughty Dog did with The Last of Us. And I think to the inverse, to your point, God of War Ragnarok is a great example of the inverse of where, look, God of War already won. Ragnarok might be better, but what FromSoft is doing with Elden Ring is newer, more provocative, more interesting. Sony Santa Monica already got their flowers in 2018, right? So do we need to give it to them again? maybe not, right?
And the same logic as you're saying it applies to Tears of the Kingdom.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I think Breath of the Wild is, alongside Last of Us 2 and Elden Ring, one of the most like revered games of all time. I think literally in like the top 3 or 4 most games that won the most awards. And so if you're talking about, okay, Nintendo EPD, Fujibayashi, these people have gotten their flowers because Breath of the Wild is maybe the game of all time now. And so the imperative to reward these people for their creativity and their success and their pushing of the medium isn't as large now, because 6 years ago, they were on top of the world, and to some extent they still are.
Yeah, exactly. So I just think that the game doesn't have it like that.
Yeah, no, definitely.
You hold it up against Baldur's Gate, which I think, as most people do, is the presumptive winner. Mm-hmm. Baldur's Gate is a much fresher title.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, it is a sequel, but it might as well not be. It is.
It's a sequel in the way Persona 5 is a sequel. Where who the fuck cares? There were other games before that. That's the one that people care about.
Be careful saying that about Persona.
I'm just fucking around. But I think people understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, exactly. And so, even if it were another year, right? I think that Spider-Man 2, and the reason I would probably put Tears of the Kingdom either in second or third.
Okay.
Because I think that Spider-Man is the inverse of what I was saying.
Sure. Yeah.
Spider-Man didn't get the accolade. Miles Morales didn't get the accolade. Spider-Man 2 is considered to be better than both. Mm-hmm. Insomniac is always up for Game of the Year. They never get it. Didn't get it for Rift Apart. Mm-hmm. Like I said, didn't get it for Spider-Man. Let's make this Insomniac's moment. Full frontal assault, Exactly. They didn't give it to Deadlocked. No. They didn't give it to Up Your Arsenal.
Jack X. No, wait, that's a different company. I'm just pulling shit out of my ass now.
I was trying to come up with the name of their VR game that they made for Facebook, but I can't remember it.
That one's past me.
And we'll get to it when we get to the actual Spider-Man episode. Yeah. I still don't think that appeal is as strong as Baldur's Gate.
No, I don't think so.
But for the reason that I think Tears falters a little bit, Spider-Man gets a boom.
Oh, absolutely.
So I do think that on a narrative level, that's the case, especially because, and Gene Park was making this point, and I think it's a salient point. Tears of the Kingdom's got a 97 in Metacritic, 96, whichever it is now. It sold 20 million copies. Everybody loved it. It got an entire summer of everybody talking about it. Yeah. It's Nintendo. Yeah. Nintendo's having their best year maybe ever. They don't give a fuck about taking home a Game of the Year award.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. And I think all that factors into, again, a very human and a very nuanced and complicated voting process, which is, what is a game that best deserves this notion of encapsulation, this Game of the Year? Mm-hmm. I would say that this was the Game of the Summer.
Sure.
I would say that it is an exceptionally good game, but it's not to Nintendo what Breath of the Wild was.
Yeah,
and it's definitely not to the industry what Breath of the Wild was.
Yeah.
Even if you have no shortage of people, players and developers alike, marveling at the physics of Tears of the Kingdom, which is why I think some of the other categories we're going to talk about, I think it will pick up for sure. But I just don't think it has it like that for Game of the Year.
Yeah, no, I think that all of the narrative stuff absolutely makes sense. When you talk about wanting to reward different people, I mean, Larian being kind of the next big RPG studio now with Baldur's Gate 3, the idea of giving them a win for them quote unquote breaking into the mainstream and making Baldur's Gate the success and the great game that it is. That's the start of something new for them. And frankly, Tears of the Kingdom is maybe the least new out of all. No, actually, that's not true. I would say Spider-Man. No, Resident Evil. Okay, well, I retract what I said. But it is less of that fresh, holy shit new thing.
Yeah.
But I still do think that there's a solid chance that it wins. And I think that the narrative of Baldur's Gate is absolutely the strongest, and why I give the edge to being safer. Yes, I would predict that Baldur's Gate can and should take it. But I think that the quality of Tears of the Kingdom has never been disputed by anyone, even the people that are
not even by me.
The mechanical complexity, the way that they've pushed physics and new engines and like the old hardware of the Switch. I mean, Tears of the Kingdom is one of the games of this year, and the fact that it is so highly regarded and so popular, I think, does still give it the edge of when people are thinking about this year. Yeah, a lot of stuff has come up, and why Tears of the Kingdom has not maintained that first place narrative is because it was a surprise that Baldur's Gate 2 and Alan Wake 2, or Baldur's Gate 3 and Alan Wake 2 were as great as they were, and that newness and that freshness, boom, catapults them into this conversation in a way that really takes some wind out of the sails of Tears of the Kingdom. But I do think when nuts come to soup at the voting process, a lot of people are going to be voting for Tears of the Kingdom. More people played that than both of those other games combined. And so from the idea of just what will these groups be voting for, and on a numbers basis, I still think that Tears of the Kingdom has a significant edge in terms of no one's disputing its quality, and it also is maybe the most popular out of all of these games.
That's an extremely important point.
Yeah.
You know, there's only so much time in the year, right? And I mean, maybe this is just because I don't give the benefit of the doubt that often, but I would just be extremely surprised if most of the outlets, you know, that are voting on Game of the Year, like, okay, guys, telling all their staffs, okay, you got to take the next, 3 weeks, go make sure you played all the nominees, you know, that's just not going to happen, right? Colin Moriarty was talking about on Sacred Symbols, like, it kind of funny when they were voting, everybody kind of threw all of their nominees into a spreadsheet, then you just sit down in the office one day and go back and forth, and you'd sort of hash out what you want to win. And because it is pretty ad hoc like that, and because everybody in games media is tired and busy with a million fucking other things, you're right.
Especially this time of year.
The game that sold 20 million units is going to have the most voting members.
And has a 97 on Metacritic. And
so if you're looking at it through the lens of somebody gun to their head, maybe didn't play Baldur's Gate, played a bunch of Tears of the Kingdom, maybe thinks super highly of Larian, thinks really highly what the game accomplished, but didn't play it, played Tears of the Kingdom, had a great time with Tears of the Kingdom, maybe you just
and had a lot of time
to
play Tears of the Kingdom. And something that's actually very interesting about the track record of which games actually end up winning is that there is a solid track record of a game coming out in that first 4 or 5 months of the year winning Game of the Year. Of course, it happened with Breath of the Wild. Overwatch was also early summer. Elden Ring, of course, was early last year.
Sekiro, God of War, basically all of them.
Yeah. And so I do think that the idea that Tears of the Kingdom has had a lot of time for people to play it and recognize its quality, as opposed to it being really crunched by the end of this year. I mean, the October was maybe one of the most busy months ever for video games. And that coming off of August and September, which were less busy, but were still plenty busy. And Starfield taking up air, and Baldur's Gate taking up air, and Armored Core, and all these games. Tears of the Kingdom had a space to its own. Because, frankly, everyone cleared out. The only thing that released around then was Redfall 2 weeks earlier. And look how that turned out. And so that had so many people paying attention to it in a way that no game this year has had the space to. And I think that from that numbers game basis and the amount of time that people have had to give it a try at least, and having its own space in the year in a way that very few games did, I think that those are things that give it a definitive bump. And I would say that there is a very clear possibility in my mind that this year is maybe the most divided Game of the Year nominee voting has ever been, in terms of people being in specific camps and being really on board with 2D Mario or Resident Evil or Alan Wake or Baldur's Gate or Tears of the Kingdom. And that split is going to go across the board. People have all of these games as their favorite of the year in a way that in previous years it's been 2 or 3 battling it out for that top spot. I think it's a lot closer of a race this year in terms of how many people have each of these games as their favorites. But again, Tears of the Kingdom has the popularity factor. And so if votes are going everywhere else, just on a numbers basis, more people are likely to vote for Tears of the Kingdom because more people have played it, and everyone who played it really likes it.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think those are the two sides of the coin, right? And I think we can talk about the other categories, because ultimately, I think you've presented quite clearly and effectively the case of sheerly thinking in terms of popularity.
Yeah.
It's got a really good case for it. And then, of course, the sort of uncontested quality of the title. But then you have not only the strengths of its competitors, but the narrative behind it perhaps being a lot weaker than the narrative behind a game like Baldur's Gate. So I think that this will be a very interesting data point to look back on in a couple of years, which Petra agrees to, I would assume. I think this race will give us a pretty interesting indication on what's valued,
Absolutely.
right? Because
because
last year Elden Ring, I think, was basically a given.
Yeah. Tears of the Kingdom was Breath of the Wild was a given. Last of Us 2 was a given. Like there are years where the narrative is so strong for one game that it becomes kind of obvious. And Tears of the Kingdom felt like that, but obviously that's not the case anymore. And I think that makes this conversation way more interesting because you go into last year and you're like, yeah, Elden Ring's going to take home game of the year. That is interesting, but I do think because that's a great game. But I think that this year, the conversation is just a lot more nuanced and allows us to bring up these things of comparing narratives and comparing quality and sales numbers. Like everything factors in here in different ways. And we won't know until that last bit of the night where it could go multiple ways with what actually takes it home.
It could go one of 6 ways.
Yeah. I'd say that's the max I would let it split, personally. But the other categories that was nominated in are, first up, Best Game Direction. The nominees being Alan Wake 2, Baldur's Gate 3, The Legend of Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom, Marvel Spider-Man 2, and Super Mario Bros. Wonder, and goddamn, what a category. Of course, these are all also in Game of the Year. The only one not in there is Resident Evil 4. But
wait, that's not true.
What? There are 6.
Resident Evil 4 is in Game of the Year.
No. The only one not in Game Direction.
Sorry.
The only Game of the Year nominee not in Game Direction is Resident Evil 4. And this is an interesting one because we've already talked about Baldur's Gate 2, 3, and Alan Wake 2, and how both of those games have very strong narratives for them winning Game Direction, depending on which way you interpret Game Direction. Do you want to go with...
I just want to... It did cut you off there. Just to pop it up again, Best Game Direction is awarded for, quote, outstanding creative vision and innovation in game direction and design.
My winner, Big Brain Academy, we'd agree, but I digress.
Fair enough.
But again, those two games have very different reasons why they could easily be game direction winner. And I would still say those are probably the two I would give the edge to, but I think that Tears of the Kingdom is no slouch when it comes to potential for winning this. The idea of the way that they reinvented a game that is built directly on the bones and the exact same map of a previous game, I think everyone realizes that is a really interesting achievement in terms of game design and progress and trying new ideas.
Here's my feeling about this category.
Yeah.
I feel like most people, I'm gonna raise my hand in this group here, don't have a clear sense of what this category even is for.
Sure. Yeah.
I think it's very cloudy for a number of reasons, just because in part games move differently than film. Games have directors, but it's not usually, in a lot of cases, as clear as this is Christopher Nolan's film, right? That's just not the way that games work as much. I mean, obviously there are marquee directors. Some of Nintendo's guys definitely are. Sam Lake is, and I think he made a really, really strong case for why Sam Lake's recognizability as a director in the way that people understand directors from film gives him a leg up. Obviously, Kojima, Druckmann, right, there are very clear directors. But I just think that this is a category that's a little wishy-washy.
Sure.
And so I think you end up needing to look at these terms here: creative vision and innovation.
Sure.
And I think you make a good case about the sort of reutilization of the map, a good case for the sort of, even though I'm a little hit or miss on its success, this notion of fusing classic Zelda into Breath of the Wild Zelda. I don't think any of that matters.
Sure.
I think it comes down to the physics engine of the game.
Yeah.
If Tears of the Kingdom wins this award, it will be because the physics engine, and there's no shortage of developers saying this on Twitter, saying this anywhere, that it is a fucking work of God.
Yeah. It might be one of the most impressive elements of engineering or programming ever developed.
On the Nintendo Switch.
Yeah.
They did that on the Nintendo Switch.
No, absolutely. And I do think that element of this game, of the direction of coming up with this fucking out of thin air. We talked about in our Tears of the Kingdom video months ago how this is kind of inspired by people jamming things together and building crazy things.
By the devs' own admission.
Yes, exactly. By the devs' admission. But that is a kind of development process that takes a very distinct understanding of game design and a clear vision of direction to say, we're taking like meme videos and using those as our springboard for the marquee title of the end of our system's generation. And the execution of it, I think, is really what sells this as not only just a Breath of the Wild sequel. Tears of the Kingdom is a Breath of the Wild sequel and does reutilize the map, but the fact that they revisited the mechanics well in such a distinct way and decided to go entirely outside of the box to create Ascend and Ultra Hand and Fuse, that's a work of direction that very few games have ever attempted. And especially within the bounds of an asset reusing sequel, usually you play it a little more safe, but this is something completely outside of the box, and I think that Fujibayashi would be so easily commended if he won Game of the Year here. Like ungodly deserved for just having this idea and having it come to fruition in the execution that it did, with as technically flawless as it is.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to pick on Ragnarok or Spider-Man 2, but you look at what those games did with their foundations, and then you look at what Tears of the Kingdom does with Breath of the Wild. It's not even comparable.
No, of course. Yeah.
If you're looking at the sort of marquee, I'm just going to call them quote unquote iterative sequels,
I think that's fair.
Of the last couple of years, there's just such a fucking gulf here, and I don't think that the sort of it's just DLC, etc. complaints stick with the people who are voting here. So I don't think that's a factor.
No, God no.
And so I think that there's a very strong case here, and you're right. Fujibayashi, how old is he? Do you know?
He's middle-aged. I mean, he's been working on this shit since fucking Minish Cap, I believe, was his first game he directed.
Yeah, he's 51.
Yeah.
But even still, how old is Ainu? He's got to be in his 70s, I would say.
Ainu was older, yeah.
Oh, no, he's 60. My bad. Sorry. I don't want to presume he looks old and haggard.
Well, he's a lot more gray.
But he's a silver fox, I think you can say.
Yeah, especially when remember at the end of the Switch presentation when he springs out from behind the TV, he's like, "Hi, Reggie," and that made me feel some kind of way.
Sorry, that was a whole digression in my mind. I was like, okay, would we class Fujibayashi as one of the younger Nintendo creatives? No,
no, but in terms of recognizability,
scale,
I would say that Miyamoto, Aonuma, now Fujibayashi,
a newer name,
having directed Skyward Sword, Breath of the Wild, and Tears of the Kingdom, he is the modern Zelda director. But I don't think it took until Tears of the Kingdom for that name, at least somewhat, to be more recognized and for the creative force that he is.
Yeah, it's the same as Koizumi, right? Because Koizumi was working back as far as Mario 64.
Yeah.
I think so.
Right. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. He was working. Oh, well, he goes all the way back to Link to the Past, but Mario obviously goes back to 64, and then obviously, he was just the producer of Odyssey. But he's sort of become the face of that series.
General producer of Nintendo Switch hardware now. Yeah, he was busy. Believe it or not.
A whole digression.
Yeah. Fujibayashi, relatively new voice, creatively distinct, deserving of this award.
Yeah, I'll put it this way. Maybe not new.
Yeah.
Now being highlighted.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And so I think it would be cool to see him win. I think that the physics engine is just so remarkable that it is a very strong case to be made.
Yeah.
I just think, again, the Baldur's Gate case is a little strong.
No, absolutely. I think that, again, I put this in third in terms of the likelihood of winning. The narratives of direction for Alan Wake 2 and Baldur's Gate 3 are maybe some of the strongest for direction ever made. I mean, you can say something about like a Kojima game feeling like more specifically directed than either of those, but the understanding of direction is shifting and evolving as the idea of game awards continues to go into the future. We will understand it better 20 years from now. And that's stupid to say, but it's true. It takes time for the narratives and understanding of these kind of categories to really catalyze. And I think it certainly has a little bit better in the last few years, but this is a year where multiple different narratives and different types of direction are culminating in an interesting battle. But I do think that ultimately the breadth of Baldur's Gate 2 and the focused nature and distinctive creative voice of Alan Wake 2. I keep saying Baldur's Gate 2. Fuck.
I don't think Baldur's Gate 2 is going to win this year.
I keep saying it because I want to say Alan Wake 2 and Baldur's Gate 3 back to back, and they get fucking mashed in my mind. Those have very, very strong narratives.
I think that's definitely fair. Best Art Direction is its next category, and it's up against Alan Wake 2, Hi-Fi Rush, Lies of P, and Super Mario Bros. Wonder.
Yeah, and I think this is the category it's least likely to win. Not only because it's up against real juggernauts, but because I think
it probably beats Lies of P.
Yeah, maybe. I haven't actually played Lies of P. People give that game a lot of flowers because it's kind of just doing Bloodborne again. People really like the Bloodborne art direction.
Yeah, I don't see it for Lies of P. To be honest,
but I am on the side of history, and in my opinion, the right side of history. That comes down on the art direction of Tears of the Kingdom as a game that builds upon Breath of the Wild. I think is absolutely deserving of a nomination here. I don't see it winning, and I think that again comes back to the conversation we have about Game of the Year in terms of it didn't do as much new as something like Wonder or Hi-Fi Rush did. But I do think that even though it's very unlikely to win, I'm very happy to see it here because I see a lot of quality in the art direction that I think goes a little bit overlooked. The idea that expanding Breath of the Wild's world with, I think, more intricate attention to art direction and design in all of the towns that were given. The feeling of all of this is very different. You walk into Gerudo Town in the Desert Storm, that art direction and the way that the shadows and the architecture combine and the colors is so distinct. And you have all the villages, like the one that has a giant fucking ring sitting on it. It's like, that's an image there that frankly, I think builds upon and makes the art direction of that era of Zelda even better. And specifically, and I think really where the quality comes in, the variety of location here is unfucking matched. I mean, the idea that they not only took the base world of Breath of the Wild and built upon it in ways that I've talked about, but the depths are a type of art direction all on their own. The way that the gloom glows in the darkness so softly, and you can see the light roots in the distance, and the way that when you throw down a bloom seed, it lights it up, and that like there is art direction there in terms of how oppressively dark it is. And on the opposite side of that coin, I would say some of my favorite art direction of the year is in the color palette and the geography of the Sky Islands. The way that it's actually like white and gold as the primary colors of those environments. Leaves are gold, the grass is gold, but it's got these big like marble pillars everywhere, and the teals of the Zonai. That is a totally distinct form of art direction that I think easily matches anything that these other games have. But on the whole, most of the time you're spending in that game is going through the Breath of the Wild world again, which is largely unchanged. Of course, it's very significantly changed, but when you're looking at the majority of the map, it's the same art style as Breath of the Wild was.
Yeah, sorry, it's just funny because you said Desert Storm, so I was imagining the Gerudo carrying out
Holy shit,
Operation Desert Storm.
Have held on to this joke while I went through that entire tirade.
I was still listening, though, because I agree with you completely. Yeah. The Sky Islands in particular are just immaculate. I think you're totally right about color. I think color is why this art direction is so successful.
Yeah.
Because they took the very naturalized landscapes of Hyrule, but then, as you're saying, implement this very warm color palette in the sky, and then this very sort of ethereal and almost neon or like luminescent art direction and color palette for the depths. But they all feel very harmonious. Yeah. I think that takes a very careful hand. And I think that the character designs are just way better here. I think that they are way better. I think it's actually the best that basically all the Zelda characters who are in this game have ever looked.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is my favorite Link design. I think that the idea of giving him the poop arm and the teal outfit and the long hair, I mean, you show that character to someone in 2013 or whatever, just after Skyward Sword came out, and you're like, that's Link. They're like, you're wrong. That's a fucking Link. What are you talking about? No hat, long hair, teal fucking garb. You're wearing a toga. It's like, what the fuck is that? But in the world and progression of From Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, and the way that teals and golds have been incorporated into the color palette through the introduction of Zonai and Sky Islands, and that being reflected in the designs of both Link and Zelda, it gives it the whole thing a very cohesive look. This is a color palette that is not only the nice blues and greens that Zelda has been known for and that Breath of the Wild used so well, but the introduction of a teal and gold color palette reflected in the main character's designs, the logo design, the box art, that really, for me, makes it my favorite use of color in Zelda. I think just around where I love Wind Waker and Minish Cap, but this game introduces new colors to the Zelda canon of color palettes, and I think that's really, really remarkable.
Yeah, I'm tired of this because it doesn't matter. It's going to lose.
No, it is going to lose. It is going to lose.
And this is the problem. Yeah. This is the problem. Because everything you're saying is totally right, and I actually agree with it completely. Yeah. I don't think... I wouldn't give it art direction because I think that Alan Wake and Mario Wonder both, for very different reasons, have more impressive art direction. But even that doesn't matter because those aren't going to win either. No. I'm becoming more and more assured in my perspective that Hi-Fi Rush is just going to take the category. Because everything you're saying is totally true in the ways that it reimagines Zelda. Yeah. But any fucking Tom, Dick, and Harry sitting down to vote puts a screenshot of all these games next to each other. Hi-Fi Rush is the one that stands out. Yeah. That's the one that wins. Same way that best hair and makeup is most hair and makeup, right? Hi-Fi Rush is just going to take the category. Yeah. So I think your impassioned defense is going to fall on deaf ears, but absolutely. Ears I agree with. And ears I was reflecting about, I actually wasn't thinking about your ears. I was thinking about, I got the Zelda amiibo that's sitting up there in my ottoman. A beautiful character design. Yeah. The colors of the blade that she's holding.
Character design, very beautiful.
Yeah, I don't see it. I don't see it to the extent that everybody else does.
Sure, but if her hair was red.
Let me just say this to you, Tucker.
Okay, you know what? I respect that.
I see you.
Next up, we have Best Score and Music. The nominees being Alan Wake 2, Baldur's Gate 3, Final Fantasy 16, Hi-Fi Rush, I don't know what I'm doing like that, and Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. Great goddamn category. Tears of the Kingdom, probably second for me here. In terms of my personal enjoyment of these scores, I think that, the use of fucking saxophone and orchestral score in Tears of the Kingdom is like some of the craziest moments of like combining score and scale and art direction, all of that I've ever experienced in a video game. It's probably one of my favorite musical scores. I think it builds very nicely on the sparse score that Breath of the Wild had, but with a little bit more pizzazz and epicness in the orchestration. It really does build on that in great ways, but I think it's nearing the bottom of the barrel in terms of its likelihood to win here.
Yeah, I maintain that Final Fantasy is going to win this category.
Yeah, and I would agree with that, and that's my number one.
Yeah, and here's the truth about me and game music, right? It's in one ear and out the other. Yeah. Not because I don't think it's impressive.
But. Do you recognize that? That's stuck in that fucking empty head of yours?
Is that Chameleon Twist?
No, I don't think so.
There's scores that I love. Yeah. I listen to game music basically constantly when I'm working. Yeah. But just the way my ears work, it's not discernible to me. So frankly, the only thing I remember...
Maybe you need to reflect on your ears a little bit more.
But here's the point I'm trying to make here, right? Game scores with me often don't stick out other than my absolute favorites, but I don't remember any of the score of Alan Wake. No, I remember, of course, some of the vocal tracks, but the sax riff in the trailer for Tears of the Kingdom. I think we all just a little, but we all came a little bit when we had the yeah. So I really do like that part of the score. To be honest with you, I don't remember any of the rest of the score. Yeah. But it doesn't matter because Final Fantasy is going to win. Yeah. So.
And there's only one category left. Do you want to read the nominees for this?
Yeah, this is Best Action and Adventure. Nominees being Alan Wake 2, Tears of the Kingdom, Spider-Man 2, Resident Evil 4, and Star Wars Jedi Survivor. As we've been saying in all these videos, when it's applicable, the category of the night. Yeah. Maybe. Yeah. In terms of competition. But Tears of the Kingdom is going to win it.
I think so. I think that this might be the action/adventure game ever made. In terms of the scope and the spectacle and the variety of action that you're doing in this game. Of course, there are phenomenal moments of action and adventure in all of these games. We made the case when we talked about Resident Evil 4 that maybe that is the least out of all of these. But I think Tears of the Kingdom not only can win this, but should win this. In terms of when I think of action and adventure in a video game, Tears of the Kingdom exemplifies that not only through its spectacle, but just the sheer quality of it. It's one of the best adventure games ever made. The amount of freedom that you have, and I think that's something that for me resonates with the idea of adventure, the choice and the breadth of the way that you
You gotta
approach a
be
game.
careful. Some fucking random person's gonna pop out of the floorboards and say that it's not an adventure game unless you're like clicking, like fucking putting winches into holes or whatever. Yeah. But adventure as a notion, I think you're totally right about.
Yeah, and so would you say that this is the category it's most likely to win out of all of these?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I think so, because I think that if there's going to be sort of a groundswell motivation to get Spider-Man a win, it's probably going to be Game of the Year, which I don't think is going to happen. But
Spider-Man for Game of the Year?
What I'm saying is, if people are going to try to get Spider-Man to win something,
sure,
funnel towards Game of the Year, I don't think everyone's going to get together and be like, man, we got to make sure that Spider-Man wins. Action adventure.
Yeah, sure.
So I think that the Tears of the Kingdom is just going to take it by merit of its quality. To me, everything under Game of the Year is basically just about quality, or about what makes the most logical sense to the lowest common denominator.
Yeah.
I.e., Hi-Fi Rush. Not to disparage the voter or Hi-Fi Rush, but the reality of the situation is sometimes a certain way.
Absolutely.
But looking at this category, I don't really think there's many people who pound for pound say Spider-Man 2 is a better game than Tears of the Kingdom. So I just think it takes it.
Yeah.
And I also think adventure games are stupid. So we ought to just assert that this is what adventure games are.
Games like Breath of the Wild. So you only play Genshin Impact, Immortals Phoenix Rising, Legends Arceus, Sonic Frontiers.
Star Fox Frontiers, yeah. I couldn't think of Sonic.
Best Breath of the Wild is really what we're talking about here.
But yeah, I think it's gonna win. I think it's gonna win, and I think it's gonna win.
Any game with a big grassy field is eligible for this category.
Halo Combat Evolved has some very big, very grassy fields.
Point, yeah.
I would put Halo Combat Evolved. If it was Halo Combat Evolved versus Tears of the Kingdom, I would say Halo Combat Evolved wins.
Of course you would. Now, this is interesting. Talking through all these categories, I think I've made a solid case why it could win each of these. And I think that on the night of, if it won any of these categories, we wouldn't be that shocked. I think outside of art direction, which I think we're both in agreement, Hi-Fi Rush pretty much has on lock.
And probably score.
Oh, sure. And score. Yeah. But it has strong case in some of these. But I think it also is up against other games that have a strong case, if not stronger case, in all of these categories. And so, outside of action adventure, there's a chance this game goes home empty-handed. And I mean, action adventure could even somehow be split, so where it doesn't end up winning, and that would be very interesting. If Legend of Zelda: Tears of the Kingdom, one of the highest revered games of all time, gets no wins, it's possible, but that's only because of how competitive this year is and all these categories are.
It is interesting that this, and significantly sounds more drastic than I mean it really, but it is interesting that this game has a substantially less number of nominations than Alan Wake or Baldur's Gate, which have the highest at 8.
Yes.
This game has what?
5?
Yes. Because I do think you could get this into a number of other categories.
I don't think I agree, actually. Because, I mean, it can't be an action because it's already an action adventure. I guess it could have been an RPG, but that, that becomes a little bit more nebulous in terms of where things land. But audio design, maybe. Not narrative, probably not. Not performance.
I would put it up for narrative. I'd say narrative and performance are the other categories it could have gone for.
Sure.
I would say that Matt Mercer as Ganondorf.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Is a stronger nomination than, frankly, Cameron Monaghan as Cal Kestis.
I would agree.
Or Idris Elba as Salman Rushdie, maybe.
Sure. Well, he's famous.
Now, he is famous.
Yeah.
And Idris Elba.
You failed to remember the famous factor.
Also, Idris Elba is just a cool. He's a chill ass viber, so I'm fine with him getting the award. But I think you could have easily put Matt Mercer in there. I think as Ganondorf is fantastic, and I do think that best narrative it could have snuck into best narrative. Maybe. I feel.
I just don't think there's enough love for the narrative in particular. I mean, I think it's good. I think it's better than Breath of the Wild's narrative.
Yeah.
But I don't think as a game, the narrative is one of the strong elements of this game. And with a lot of the games of this year and the ones nominated in that category, the narrative is really what makes them the games that they are in terms of why people love them. But there are, I think, equal parts people that are like, yeah, the narrative of Tears of the Kingdom is very good. And there's another part that's like, no, it's actually not very good. It's kind of horseshit. And then there's people that are like, I didn't fucking pay attention. I didn't watch any of the cutscenes. I don't give a shit.
In fairness, people that have been, I don't know, they fell downstairs and sustained brain damage and have played through all of Baldur's Gate 3, have said that the overarching narrative of Baldur's Gate's not the strongest. It really is all the side stuff. And I think you can make a very strong case for, in a non-conventional way, the emergent gameplay moments, the choices you make, the quests you decide to pursue.
I think even just the interactions with side characters. I mean, the idea, going back to Tarrytown and seeing how that has evolved and seeing the writing of those characters and saving Laurelin Village and visiting Gerudo Village again. Like, these are amazing. Some of the best small stories of personal connection I've ever experienced in a Zelda game. So I think from that angle, I do agree.
I also... If I may, also, I do think that the final 2 hours of Tears of the Kingdom, this is my nuanced opinion of Tears of the Kingdom. The final 2 hours of Tears of the Kingdom are the best 2 hours in the Zelda series.
Sure. Yeah.
From my perspective. Yeah. I wouldn't put the overarching game even in my top 5 Zelda games, but that last 2 hours, I fucking adore. And so I just think that between what these spectacle-driven linear moments offer... and the sophistication in the storytelling of connecting to Breath of the Wild and iterating on those relationships, and then just the emergent gameplay storytelling opportunities, I do think it could have gotten in here, especially, if we're going to put Phantom Liberty in there. Now, I've played very little Phantom Liberty, so I'm not trying to disparage it, and obviously you won't find many Cyberpunk defenders bigger than me, but if you're going to put an expansion in there, I think that this had a shot. And don't tell me, it doesn't line up with the timeline. The Koroks don't know who Link is. I don't give a fuck about the timeline. I promise you, less than 1% of the people that played Tears of the Kingdom, if you gave 20 million people who played Tears of the Kingdom a blank piece of paper and a pencil and said, sketch out the Zelda timeline.
Maybe 100 of them.
Maybe 100 of them would be able to do it. I wouldn't be able to do it.
No, absolutely not.
No one gives a fuck about the timeline.
There's one where he loses? Is that the one where he wins?
There's one where he's fucking... I don't know.
There's one where he's Toon. Where the CDI games fit into this?
They don't, and that's the biggest issue with the timeline.
Yeah, they just pick and choose. You pick and choose. But you've actually made a pretty good case of why it could have easily been nominated. But I think I come down on... This feels like the right amount of nominations. And if, as competitive of a year as it is... I think that it was nominated in the correct categories. I think there are cases to be made, as you have for things like narrative, or if you want to go with audio design or performance. But also, it's not like the games in those categories already are lacking to where it feels like Tears of the Kingdom is missing from them. And I think that the interesting thing is that there's just more space for a game like Alan Wake or Baldur's Gate that are narrative focused and do have consistently high quality performances that are very present throughout the game. There's just more space for them to be nominated, as opposed to Tears of the Kingdom. And actually, I just want to quickly look at the 2017 Game Award and see what Breath of the Wild was nominated for.
That's a good exercise.
Yeah, just see if there was any areas where this was nominated that it...
I can't imagine that anybody got nominated for performance out of Breath of the Wild.
No, God, no. No, the performances are actually way better in Tears of the Kingdom, though. Raru's voice and...
I wouldn't say that they're way better, but I would say that they're better, and I would say that Matt Mercer does circles around everybody else in that voice cast.
Now,
and I'm not just saying that because he's in lock on Volume 6 pre-order now.
In 2017, for the Game Awards, Breath of the Wild was nominated for Game of the Year, winning. Game Direction, winning. Art Direction, losing to Cuphead. Again, another thing. You look at Cuphead and you're like, that's a thing.
Of course.
Nominated for score and music, losing to Nier Automata. It was nominated for Best Audio Design, so that's a place where Return of the Kingdom did not get it. Though, a lot more survival horror games came out this year. And obviously, audio design of Tears of the Kingdom is great, and probably on par with Breath of the Wild, but again, more competitive year. And action adventure. So exact same slate, though, with the space and frankly the popularity of Breath of the Wild, it was able to squeeze out other nomination. Interesting thought experiments all around. Abram, any closing thoughts on Tears of the Kingdom and Game of the Year?
Not really, to be honest with you. Not really. I think we've very thoroughly gone through it. And I think it's an interesting
with a comb, like a comb with a couple of fine ass teeth.
Yeah, it's an interesting game to discuss because Nintendo obviously had the most nominations of any publisher, and we'll maybe talk about this in the Mario video because we can go through it there more. But obviously, a crowning year for Nintendo, and it'll just be interesting to see which categories they can actually take home.
Yeah,
I mean, obviously they've got some on lock; they're gonna win.
Family game,
family. I think that they'll probably also take Sim Strategy.
Sure.
Between Pikmin and
Advanced
what's
Wars
the other one?
and
Fire Emblem and Advance Wars. But it's interesting to see. Obviously, this is the game they lead with, because of course it is. And it'll be curious to see most nominated, but will they be the biggest winners of the night? I'm not sure. We'll see. I'm gonna do the intro. I'm gonna hit you with it.
1 second.
You better duck. I'm gonna hit you.